What is going on, my salty home gymmers? Welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to be talking about the RITFIT Gazelle Pro. And this is RITFIT's new machine with the hack squat, leg press, and squat, hack squat extension pads. Similar to their other hack squat, leg press machine, but this one seems a little more beefed up. So we are gonna get into everything. We're gonna talk about its positives. We're gonna talk about its negatives. Now, hang on a minute now. Negatives. I mean, there's gonna be negatives. I come up with negatives on every We're gonna talk about negatives in this machine? Well, I mean, I haven't even used it looks like a pretty good machine. I mean, it looks like a pretty good machine. I mean, hang on now. It seems pretty sturdy in my gym, but I gotta, come on, I gotta use it in front of the camera, and I gotta do this thing where I show the functionality of the machine. And I'm very strong. Assembly, incredibly easy. Definitely a one-person job. Shipping was on time. I'd just like to say that, side note, one thing I love about RITFIT is they're extremely responsive in their customer service. That's just one positive thing that I'll say about the brand. The assembly is incredibly easy. Everything fit together well. These machines typically are pretty easy to assemble. I've never had a whole lot of these machines that are difficult to assemble. The instructions are very clear. The only thing I would pay attention to, and I say this about a lot of machines, is pay attention to your bolt sizes. Some of these bolts are very close in size, and if you don't pay attention, you'll end up going back and having to undo some stuff and switch it out for the right size bolts. Some of these measurements on these bolts are very close together and they can look similar. Once it came together, very solid. Not a whole lot of movement in this bad boy. Next thing we're gonna talk about is the dimensions. Your dimensions front to back are 86.4 inches. Your dimensions width-wise are 48.2 inches. And to be honest, I don't do this very often, but at the time of this recording, I'm not quite sure that includes these bars. I wanna say no, but I'm gonna double check and I'll put it in the description for you. I'll put those measurements in there. We're gonna get into some more interesting stuff about these plate horns as well. And then your height is 57.8 inches for a total of 28.93 square feet. So about your average footprint for one of these style machines, maybe a little larger than its competitors. Now, some other specs on this machine that you probably need to be aware of. There's always this one guy in the comments that's like, oh, this feels like an ad more than a review. But listen, I like to start out my videos with all the basic information about these machines. If you feel like skipping ahead to my critiques of this machine, you're not gonna offend me. But a few more specs that you should be aware of. Your dynamic functional weight capacity of this machine is 1,300 pounds. Is that accurate? Honestly, like I said before, it is a pretty solid machine. I probably wouldn't exceed 1,300 pounds on this machine. That's a lot of weight for a machine like this. Now, let's get into the functions of this machine. While we're breaking down those functions, I'm gonna go over what I think of the materials and my critiques of each movement, because there's multiple different exercises and movements to this machine, and I'm gonna give you my critiques on each one. Now, the first thing you're gonna see right off the bat that you have here is your hack squat. And the first thing I want to talk about in the hack squat is these pads up here to do those push squats with. Now, myself, I don't find myself using them really that often. I definitely think it's a cool feature. For reps, yes, but when you get that heavier weight on there, it becomes just a little difficult for me. I don't know about anyone else. You know, everyone's form is different, everyone's exercise is different. But for me, I find it just a touch difficult to keep my back straight, and that's why I prefer the normal hack squat, which we'll get into here in a minute. Now, I will say an awesome use for this is your calf raises. Calf raises are so much easier and so much quicker access with these pads up here. Even if I have my leg press pad down here, I can still jump on this machine and bang out those calf raises. But the pads where your shoulders go are super firm and seem very well made. And that goes for all the pads on this machine, including your back pad here, which is for leg press, and your hack squat. I'll be honest with you, this company makes great equipment, but the equipment they typically send me, let's just say pads aren't their strongest feature on the machine. That's not the case here. Honestly, these pads are great. It really surprised me from RITFIT. Definitely a comfy machine, and definitely pads that feel like they can take a beating. And I feel like that's a super neglected feature in home gym machines. And the next thing I'll talk about is the actual hack squat, which does have a nice big platform, which is adjustable, and I'll go into the adjustments more here in a little bit. The platform itself is 29.92 inches wide and 21.65 inches tall. So lots of room there to adjust your footing. The hack squat on this machine is probably your strongest feature, and I'm gonna express that. The hack squat is a really, really good feeling hack squat. If you're a person that likes to get those deep stretches on your squats, I've gotten a lot of these machines that kind of just feel a little awkward with foot placement and how deep I can go on that movement. especially with these combo machines. This one I was able to go deep with that squat, and it makes for a really comfortable movement. Now, before I get to the leg press portion, I just want to show you real quick how this transforms into that leg press. It's super easy. First, you take out this pin back here and you remove the pad, and you put the pad on this platform here, and then you line up your pad with your hole, drop the pin in, and that does it for the pad. Then to extend the foot plate for the leg press, you have to reach underneath the machine, pull this pin. There's this nice little handle there that you can grip, pops out, and then you have a couple different holes there, a couple different adjustment points there. It's really that simple. Very easy transition. And then to go back to the hack squat, obviously, just reverse those steps. It is a rather large foot plate for a hack squat combo. It's still not a huge plate per se, but for a hack squat combo, it's a pretty big plate, which is nice to see. I've always felt that the biggest drawbacks to these hack squat leg combo machines is a small plate. In all honesty, I would love for these machines to come with bigger plates than these even, but compared to its competitors in this hack squat combo arena, it is a pretty large plate. It is 29.59 inches at its widest. It is 15.94 inches tall. Honestly, I need more of this from these types of machines. Here is my biggest issue with the leg press that I don't feel as much comes into effect on my hack squat. When I saw this machine on the website, it has these two big rods that led me to believe that it was a machine that operates on a linear bearing, but instead it is a machine that operates mounted on rollers as its movement mechanism. And if you're not familiar with linear bearing versus rollers, made simple, linear bearing is a machine that's mounted to a tube and just goes up and down that rod. I don't know why every single time I do one of these videos, I end up doing something that seems super duper dirty. With rollers, your machine is mounted to typically how we have here, operate on this rod, or sometimes it can be like a square frame like this, but they are essentially wheels. Typically one wheel is on top of the other wheel, and they roll up and down on that bar or rod or frame or whatever you want to call it. This doesn't necessarily make it a less smooth movement. In fact, I would say this machine does operate smoothly, but on the leg press, what I see with a lot of these machines that operate on rollers, including this one, when you operate the leg press, the foot plate kind of has a tilt or a shift. And this doesn't seem like a huge deal, but if you're one of those people who likes to operate a leg press with one leg at a time, this can kind of make that difficult. Now, I have noticed if you put some of that weight on the bottom and counterbalance it, it does clean that pivot up just a little bit. And it is interesting to me because if you look at RITFIT's other hack squat leg press combo, you'll see that it does operate on a linear bearing, which you would think would be brought over to this newer, fancier version. I'm not sure what came into play that made RITFIT's manufacturer go with the roller over the linear bearing, but I definitely think this machine would operate so much better on a linear bearing rather than a roller. Outside of that, the leg press is smooth. I have heard certain complaints, and RITFIT heard this too, and I'll get into that here in a second. I have heard certain complaints that there are a lot of noise that comes from these rollers, but that just wasn't my experience. Every time I operate this machine, no matter what exercise I do on it, it's very quiet. I haven't heard any screeching, rolling, anything like that, any noises of that nature. And I'll give you some silence to hear that. Lubricant is your friend with all these style machines. Maybe that's why I don't have those issues, is because I always use that lubricant on my equipment the minute I assemble it. RITFIT actually sent me an extra set of rollers that were meant to be quieter that is on their new machine. I have not put those rollers on yet, but they are shipping a machine with different rollers than this. And I didn't put those rollers on because I just didn't hear any of that noise they were talking about. Now, this machine does have a safety stop. For those of you that like to go to failure, anytime I do a leg press video, I always hear people mention a safety stop, and they always have questions about that. You are getting that with this machine. There are 4 different adjustment points with your safety. Another safety feature you have, which obviously most of these machines have, is your spotter on the side. It is pretty basic. Finally, I also want to talk about your adjustment zones in this machine. You do have a few of them here. First couple adjustment points you have, there's 3 foot plate adjustment points to adjust that tilt. A surprising amount of adjustment here in the back. This adjuster pin is actually just one of your band pins. They just made use of that material, but it works. There's 2 adjustments with the pin and 2 adjustments each for a total of 4. One more thing I wanted to talk about is these plate horns. I thought these plate horns were kind of cool, because they're not bolted into the machine. They actually just come up and remove just like a plate horn would on a rack attachment, which is kind of cool because this thing does have kind of a big footprint, and if you have that smaller home gym and you're trying to squeeze that equipment in there, you don't necessarily need that top counterbalance. I like to leave them off when I'm not using it, because it's nice, because when I try to get in between my rack here, I'm not bonking myself in the head trying to get plates behind it with that plate horn there. You also have some plate horns here in the back. These plate horns are also not bolted in. You can take them off very easily as well. And then the last thing we'll talk about is your options for bands. You do have multiple options for bands on the bottom and the top. I'm not the biggest band user, so I don't find myself using them that often, so I can't give you really any critiques about them. And that seems like it's gonna do it for me. If you have any questions on anything that I've missed, I'm sure I've missed something, please let me know down in the comments. I'm very responsive. And if you like this video, please share it, please subscribe. Thanks for checking me out.